Previously on microwaves and ovens, we learned last week about the Gemara's approach, the Shulchan Aruch's approach to ovens, and the Shulchan Aruch, the only discussion we saw in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch regarding ovens when it comes to milk and meat is a discussion: can you have milk and meat at the same time in one oven or not? There the Shulchan Aruch said if it's a big oven, yes, because then the smell, you won't absorb much of the smell. But if it's a small oven, you shouldn't. But b'diavad, if you did, it still remains kosher because the smell of non-kosher, smell of meat and milk mixing together does not make it not kosher b'diavad. And if it's only a faint smell, then even the katchila, it's okay. That was the Shulchan Aruch, that was the Gemara. That's the only discussion we found in the Gemara. So we tried to understand historically how did we find ourselves with two ovens, at least some houses. So we saw last time we started with the Rosh. Tshuva Rosh, that was source number 4, and he introduced a new concept called ze'ah. Ze'ah is not sweat, ze'ah is condensed steam that condenses and becomes liquid. The process is called condensation. There you go. Condensation. Says the Rosh, based on a Mishnah in Masechet Machshirin. Mishnah Masechet Machshirin says that there are 7 liquids that allow food to become tameh. Only 7 liquids. Yad shechat dam, yav yain dam, shemen, chalav, and tal. And dam and mayim. Only those 7. Any other liquids, apple juice, does not machshir lekabel tumah. Okay, so what does that have to do with anything? He says, the Mishnah says that if you had a steam, and the steam became of a bathhouse, the steam evaporated, and then the word was? Condensates. Condenses and becomes water, then it still has the same properties as the original water. It's not new water. If the water was tahor, it's tahor water. If water is tameh, it's tameh water. It's exactly the same. Even though in the middle it was smoke, eventually it comes back to the water. Now we know from a physics perspective that's true, because even when it's smoke, yes, it's water vapor, and then when it condenses, it becomes water again. Condensates, it becomes water again. So that makes a lot of sense. But the Rosh says that's true for all liquids. Meaning, also milk that would evaporate, turn to steam, condense, and then turn to liquid. That liquid will also be treated as milk. Now, one could say, well, only the water vapor goes up, and says the Rosh, no, the water vapor takes milk with it, and then when it condenses on top, it's therefore milk. And why is that important? Therefore, when he was asked, we'll see the Shulchan Aruch based on this Rosh rules the following halacha in source number 5. Machvat shel chalav shenatnu b'kira tachat gdera shel basar. If I take a milk dish and I put it underneath a meat dish, haze'ah ola v'nivla b'kdera ve'osarta. That means if I'm making milk souffle, and above it I have a meaty pot, a meaty dish, being cooked at the same time, the steam from the milky dish will go up, get condensed on the meat pot, get absorbed into the pot, and make everything not kosher.
The pot or the food?
Both the pot and the food. Both the pot and the food will become not kosher. Now, of course, the Rama says, of course, that if it's a shishim, it would be a problem, but what's important for us, there is an issue of that steam. That steam he calls ze'ah. Now, since you have the issue of ze'ah, that leads the Rama to say, in the next ze'ah, okay, so therefore, it becomes clear that one after another, at the same time, you cannot have milk and meat at the same time, 2 dishes, one on top of each other. The Shulchan Aruch was talking about two dishes side by side, on top of each other would be a problem. Okay? The question that Achronim now want to discuss, everyone understand why? Now so that's stage number 2. Stage 1 after each other, Shulchan Aruch said, no problem. Lekatchila might be a problem if it creates a strong smell. However, when on top of each other, the Shulchan Aruch says that would be a problem, because then the steam would go directly, and we also can imagine understand the difference. Stage 3 in our historical understanding of ovens is the following question. Should I worry about, even when they're side by side, not side by side, what if I do, instead of side by side, one after each other, one after another, in the same oven? That obviously should be okay, because the poskim want to ask, are we afraid that maybe the steam, after it goes up, it can later on come down? In the case of the oven, that would mean I use it to make something, pizza. The steam of the milk goes up, gets absorbed into the top of the oven. Then later on, when I use the meat, do I have to worry about that steam later on coming down and making my food not kosher? Based on that logic of the Rosh. The Rosh told us that the steam is like the essence itself. So, do I have to worry about that or not? So many Achronim want to say that yes, and what's their proof? They prove it with the Shulchan Aruch in source number 6. The Shulchan Aruch in source number 6 says, "Im lakhu kisui koteach mekdera shebasar v'netnu et akdera shechalav im shneim chamim shneim asurim." Says the Shulchan Aruch the following. Reality happened to me. It happens all the time. Probably one of the most common scenarios. You're making a hot soup, and the chicken soup is on the fire, and you cover it, and then you notice you used the wrong cover. You used the milk cover. The pots are the same size, and you covered it instead of with the handle, with the circle, and you always make that same mistake. The second time you made that mistake, but it's all good because next time you know how to do hachshara, so it's your responsibility, so it's no big deal. Regardless, you made that mistake. What do you do? Is there a problem here with the food? Now, we learned already that obviously the kisui, the pot covering, the cover, it probably will be not kosher. Why? The Rosh said the steam from this chicken soup is going to go up and get absorbed into the cover of the milk pot. That milk pot cover is now milk and meat, so the milk pot cover is not kosher. We get that. But the Shulchan Aruch didn't say only that is asur. He says, Shnehem asurim, im yesh ma'achal b'kdera shebasar v'chalav. He says, they are both not kosher. Also the food will become not kosher. How does the food become, what?
Even if it's clean?
Even if it's clean.
And the pot?
And you didn't use it for 24 hours.
No. Yeah, you didn't. You used it within the last 24 hours. If the pot covering is ben yoma, that is true. We're talking. It was used in the last 24
but
hours.
You also said bidi evid, like not lechatchila with that anyway. You said bidi evid if you did it by mistake and not on purpose. As far as the 24 hours goes.
24 hours. That was but for something powerful. That's only for powerful.
Okay.
That's powerful. We're talking about milk and meat. Not bananas, only for powerful.
What if the cover's glass?
Okay, but let's first understand the simple case, and then we'll talk about glass. Okay? Simple case, metal cover, you covered. Sadly, the covering is not kosher, but even more so, the food is a problem. Why is the food, if the covering was hot? In other words, if you put it on for a second, oh, made a mistake, you're good. But you left it on the fire, and then you come over after 20 minutes, it's all cooking together for a while, and then, oh man, he used the wrong covering. He says the food might be an issue. Why? Why?
Because it'll drip down into the...
What would drip down? So what's going to happen?
The condensation that's on the lid will drip back down.
So the condensation of the chicken soup is going to go on top, get absorbed into the milk, but also absorbed from the milk pot. So now that those droplets are not droplets of chicken soup anymore, they're chicken soup with milk. Now those droplets are now going to drip down back into the pot, and it's going to happen again and again and again and again and again and again. That's why the Shulchan Aruch says not only the pot is a problem, the pot covering, but also the food. There could be bitul b'shishim if your pot.
It's clean. I mean, if the lid is clean.
Yeah, if the lid is okay. So regarding lids, two rules. Rule number one is Shulchan Aruch rules: lids are never clean. Lids are never clean. That's what Shulchan Aruch rules. There's a special status of lids. Lids are never clean. It's hard to clean them. The later poskim say if you have a specific.
pot you have and what kind of pot
Later poskim come and say, come on, there are some lids that have he was talking about a pointy shape, it's hard to clean. The outer shapes that could be clean, the poskim say yes. Hara number two, there could be shishim, but you would have to have a big pot, a huge pot, that shishim that's 60 times the cover. It's a big pot. But theoretically, yes. Yeah, they're big pot.
60 times the cover or 60 times the condensation that comes out?
It was 6 times the condensation. Since we don't know how much condensation that is, we go the worst case scenario which is the covering itself. That's why most case scenarios, if it was a ben yomo was used, the covering was used in the last 24 hours, seemingly you would be in trouble. And you have to call the rabbi and see if you can find the kula. But the simple halacha, Shulchan Aruch says, you're in trouble. Based on that, poskim say, wait a minute, says the Rama, that should also apply to ovens. You shouldn't imagine the top of the oven as your cover. And if you accidentally let's say you use your oven for meat, and then use your oven for dairy, then the same process might happen as well. What do I care if it's a cover of a pot or just the top of the oven? The same process. It goes up, droplets go up of the chicken soup or the dairy, get absorbed, become not kosher, and then drop down into the food, making it all not kosher. If that's the process, if that is true, then there would be a problem to use the same oven for both milk and dairy. If you want to say otherwise, you have to explain to me, say the poskim, what the difference is between an oven and the case of the accidentally using the wrong cover for the pot. Yes?
Is there a time difference between uses? In other words, if you're cooking the chicken soup now, the lid was used last week for dairy.
Okay, so
And it was washed with a detergent, so which is not edible, not bad tasting, and so on. And then it was sat there for a week, and then you put it on the box.
So, important remark, what I emphasized earlier that we're talking about in the case of the cover, wrong cover, it was a ben yoma. You used that cover, it's a dairy cover that was used for dairy in the last 24 hours. If it wasn't used for dairy in the last 24 hours, and you accidentally put it on, then let's do the thought process. The cover, what's the status of the cover?
It's
Not kosher. But the food will remain kosher. Why? Because the milk that comes out of the cover will be pogem. We assume it makes the flavor of the chicken soup take a bit worse, and then we don't have to worry about it. Okay? So in that scenario, if the cover was not used in the last 24 hours, even if you made that mistake, then you're good. Okay? So that's usually why these cases usually do not end in tragedy of the soup being thrown out. They usually end with the simple question, was the cover used for dairy in the last 24 hours? Usually the answer is no, and then the soup is fine, you put the covering aside, and you eat the soup. If the answer is yes, then you need a rabbi to find the different ways of saving that soup, or not.
Why,
Okay?
why isn't the oven a lot more problematical.
Why is the oven more problematic?
The cover can be washed, like the pot is washed and the cover is washed. Who washes or cleans?
So you
the
can go
oven?
further. You're saying, of course, we should be more strict with ovens. There he says, of course, we're more strict in ovens. The pot, at least we try to clean, and even when we clean it, we say it doesn't help because it's hard to clean the pot. An oven, no one's going to clean the top of the oven for between meat and milk. So therefore, you're saying we should be more strict, and that's even more reason why it should be just like the cover in a pot, and we shouldn't be able to use it the same oven for meat and milk. Baruch Hashem, poskim. So important chumrah, and many agree with you. But we're going to try to bring some poskim who show there is a difference. There is a difference between ovens, at least in some scenarios, between ovens and first. The Chacham Ovadia, Zichrono Levacha, has a big tshuva where he brings many options why there might be a difference. We're going to bring a few of them. The first difference is certainty. Like in the case of the pot, the steam goes up, gets absorbed, and has nowhere else to go except down. So you're kind of certain that's what's going to happen. Like simple physics, when it condenses, if gravity is going to pull it down, there's only one place it can go down into, and that's into your pot. That might be different than the case of the oven. In the case of the oven, first of all, there's a big distance. It's not like the cover where it's so close. Second of all, when it condenses, how do you know it's going to fall directly into your food? I don't know where it's going to condense and where it's going to fall. It's not as certain as the case of the pot. Everyone understand the differentiation number one? So he discusses some poskim. He brings, the way Chavavada's tshuvas work in general is he brings many reasons why it might be okay, and he brings both sides. Some people say, this is a reason, no, they don't. And then he brings them all together to say, to be lenient. So the first seif he brings to lenient is a discussion between poskim, who many of them claimed that regarding ovens, we do not have to worry about it dripping back down, because the chances of it actually occurring are smaller. And besides, the distance between the cover and the pot and the pot and the top of the oven is much bigger. And who says you have to worry about it condensing in the first place? So it's a reality claim. In reality, we shouldn't be as worried as in ovens as we are with a covering of a pot.
And if the pot itself is covered in the
Oh, we already said this last week. Very important hara. We said if you put in a dairy oven, it's called dairy oven food. If you covered it completely in tinfoil, we said, the Rema said, Shulchan Aruch agreed that you can put that in the oven. That's for sure okay. Remember we talked about that last week, and the same thing regarding microwaves, where you can double wrap it and just put it in, even if you know the microwave is not kosher. If you go to Airbnb and you want to use the oven, covering it all in tinfoil is always your most simplest solution because it's a technical solution. It's a technical solution because nothing, will the cover of the tinfoil cover become not kosher? Maybe, but the food will remain kosher, and that's what's important. So we're talking about without the need to covering it and wrapping it with tinfoil. If you we're talking case when it's open. If it's wrapped, that always solves the problem.
Does that have to be triple wrapped?
And double wrap is because we're afraid people won't wrap once properly, so then we recommend doing double wrap. Okay, that is claim number one on the Chacham Ovadia, where he suggests this. He says he's not sure. He himself, from his lashon of his tshuva, he wasn't convinced. He thinks that the pot cover is the same thing, but he brought those who said it's different. Claim number two. Claim number two, I'm going to jump not by order of the pages. I'm not going to do, I'm going to go to Tanugim Shalanu. It's a big discussion. Okay, source number 6. יש להעיר על מה שכתב בשו"ת אבן יקרה, שתנור שסיכום בפנים מבשלים בתוכו בשר וחי חלב, יש לומר שאין לחוש לזיעה, כי הזיעה עולה מן המאכל נשרפת טרם הבעלה בעליונו של תנור. So difference number 2 is, unlike the covering of the pot, the top of the oven is so much hotter, and it won't condense on top. What would happen when it gets on top? Let's drop it. It's going to burn. It's going to evaporate. Any remnants of milk or meat that was in those water droplets on the top of the oven is just going to burn away, turn black. If you go to the top of your oven, put your finger there, there's black. Where'd that black food burn come from? The food, you don't cook on the top of the oven, yet it's black. The answer is all the steam and the ze'ah of all the food you cook in your oven evaporates, condenses on top, and gets burnt before it has a chance to fall back down. So says Chamavadia, that very much can be. That's another reason that's different than the covering of the pot. The cover of the pot, the steam isn't going to condense there. It's not going to burn up. Here it might burn up. Moshe Feinstein heard this. He said, interesting claim, but he said in source number 7, ולתלוש שנשרפה ודאי אין טעם. דאינם חמים כל כך עד שישרוף. וגם אינו קרוב כל כך לאש שישרוף. He says, as a maybe I understand, it might burn, but for sure, he's saying for sure it's going to burn? Can you trust it on a lekatchila level? Like, he wants to differentiate between a b'diavad or a lekatchila. B'diavad is someone came with me to question, Rabbi, I used meat after milk in the same oven, do I have to throw out the food? He says, no, I wouldn't say yes. Why? Because maybe it burnt up. But if you would ask me, can I, lekatchila, use the same oven for milk and meat, based on this? He says, no, I'm not going to allow it, because maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe it burned up, maybe it didn't burn up. Maybe it's not going to be a problem, maybe it is going to be a problem. Now, he says because the source of heat is not on top. Now, that might be true for some ovens. I mean, my oven's really the source of heat on the side, but you can have an option where you can put it also on top, on the bottom, all around. So even according to Moshe's simple reading is, if the source of heat was on top, then I would agree you can rely on it. But since the source of heat is not on top, the source of heat in the oven is either on the side or the bottom, that's why it's not sure. You're cooking from the bottom and you're saying that the top gets hot enough to burn it. I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. But if you were to have the heat oven, the top burners, not called top burners, but the grill mode, right?
Heating element.
Heating element on top. If that was on for when you cook the meat, and then you want to use dairy, seems to Moshe, I said if you can, no, it burned out, then burned out. There's nothing to argue there. That is his. Okay, that is but again, with Moshe, bottom line was, I'm not willing to trust this on the lekatchila level. Claim number, that's claim number 2. So let's summarize. Claim number 1, why it might be different, is that it's not that certain it's going to fall inside. Claim number 2, why it might be different than a pot. For those who came, I'll explain. We said that the Shulchan Aruch ruled that if you cover a pot with the wrong cover, a meat pot with a dairy pot, everything becomes not kosher. Why? The steam from the meat gets absorbed in the cover, becomes not kosher, condenses, becomes not kosher, and falls back into the pot. Come the poskim and say, well, that logic should apply for an oven as well. I cook meat in the oven, then I cook dairy in the oven. The dairy is going to go up, absorb from the meat that's absorbed in the top of the oven, and then fall back down, just like in the case of the cover. Why should it be any different? Answer number 1 says dairy. Of course, it's not different. It's exactly the same, even more so. Right? And therefore have 2 ovens. Chamavadia said it might not be the same, and suggested 2 reasons why it might be different. Reason number 1 is, it's not as certain that the droplets are going to fall into the food as it is with the cover of the pot. There's nowhere else for it to go. It's definitely going to condense and fall down. who says that's going to happen in oven? Second is the ovens are much hotter than pots. The oven is so hot it might burn the droplets before they have a time to fall down. They'll hit the top of the oven and they'll burn. There, Rav Moshe said, interesting svara, very much can be, but can you trust it likatchila? No. But the avad, if you use it one after another, I'll probably say the food is kosher, but I won't allow you to do it, trust it likatchila. That is the two main halachic reasons. Then Chamavadia says, wait a minute. I have a question here. We're talking about condensing, right? Not every food has this problem. What foods have this problem? Liquidy foods. But if I'm making a pizza, no water liquids are going to evaporate and recondense on top of this cheese. What we're really talking about is when I'm making liquids in an oven. Now, for all purposes, liquids usually make on the stove, not in the oven. Can you make liquids in the oven? Yes, but it has
Well, the fat comes out.
Okay, so there is a discussion here. And this is what the Chamavadia. Did I bring this here? No, I didn't. Did I bring it? How liquidy is liquidy? Yeah, everyone loves that one. So there's a discussion how liquidy is liquidy, and the main machloket is like this. Some people say liquid is liquid. It actually has to be liquid, liquid. Not the fact that every meat you cook it, steam is going to come out of the meat, right? That is not considered liquid. It's if the food is a salad, then the steam that comes out of it is not ze'ah.
The steam or the
The-
pieces that fly out?
No. The steam. If the vapor that comes out of it, the vapor that comes, that's not ze'ah. Ze'ah is only vapor that comes from liquid. Now, if there's liquid on the bottom, you see that after you cook the meat, liquid came out. Okay, then you have an issue. That's ze'ah. That from that melted fat that came out of the meat, it's in the pot. That's liquid form. That would be ze'ah. Why is this important? Says Chacham Avadia, if what you're using is something yavish, not liquidy, then there's no problem. Why? Because let's say I have a meat oven, and I'll make pizza in it. What was the whole problem using it, both oven and meat? Just the case of the pot. The steam's going to come up, become that kosher on the top of the oven, and fall back down. I'm cooking my pizza. The steam come up, is that steam a problem? No, right? Because it's not liquid. No problem.
That was easy.
Yeah? When would there be a problem? If I'm in a meat oven and I'm now making a liquidy substance, milk, that would be an issue. But if you're using a solid after a liquid, you don't have an issue. So when it comes to solids, says Chacham Avadia, seemingly there will be no problem. Only discussion is regarding liquids. And since ovens, many of our uses are for solids. You're making cookies, okay? And there's milk in the ingredients. You're making milk cookies. You're making a cheesecake in the cheesecake. You make an oven? Okay. Okay. Cheesecake. Okay. Let me cheesecake. You're making it in the oven. That's solid. So solid. So you used the oven for meat. Okay. So we're using it now for a salad. The salad does not have any zeh in it. How can there be a problem? Says Chacham Avadia. There's no zeh.
The meat that you cooked it had.
The meat?
Yeah, the meat you had has zeh, and it got absorbed. Now the entire top of the oven is absorbed in meat.
Yeah, but the meat has
But
to marinate.
what's gonna take out that meat? You have to have something to go up, absorb that meat in the top of the oven, and then fall down. You making your cheesecake, nothing's going up, and there's no ze'ah to come up, absorb it, and fall back down. Why you make it fake? Because you say there is
No,
ze'ah.
because there is. I mean, the stuff is zayah there that once the oven becomes hot again, the zayah is going to be able to fall down from the meat.
Okay, so you're saying that the old ze'ah
Right.
remains, and it just might fall down. Okay, interesting. We'll see the Chamavadia how he deals with that in a sec. Yeah.
If you have an oven that you think might have been used that you're using for dairy, that you think might have been used for meat 2 months ago or whatever, do you have to kosher the oven? Or do you just need to?
We'll get kosher meat. We're talking kosher meat. Okay, we'll get to the bottom line in a second. Then we'll answer your question. Yeah.
What about the smell? If you have chicken and it smells thick.
So what we say regarding the smell? Very good question. What about, say if you went after another, it's still going to smell like chicken. So what we say? The Shulchan Aruch said regarding the smell.
That's not.
Not a problem. There's no problem. It's surprising. There's no problem that your
Except.
meat, the cheesecake smells like chicken. I mean, I don't know who would eat it, but is there a halacha problem? No. That's what we hold for halacha. Did Levi argued on that and said, "What are you talking about? That's weird." Were there opinions in the Gemara that argued on that? Yes. There were opinions that claimed if it smells like chicken, you can't eat it. It's cheesecake. But the Shulchan Aruch is lenient. He says, we don't go by smell, we go by flavor. But you're right, intuitively it's kind of weird, but that's the power of halacha. Says halacha l'maaseh. Let's go to the bottom line. We jump to the page, halacha l'maaseh. Chamavadia's, I brought you 3 poskim, bottom line, ovens and microwaves. Start with Chamavadia. He says, first of all, you can have one oven. And I explained to you can have one oven for both meat and milk, and the following conditions. First reason, first of all, who says not every food has liquids, like we talked about. And also, second of all, like we said, who says it might burn out. Ovens are hot, and they might burn the zeah. Third reason, third reason, maybe it won't fall directly into the pot. He took all those reasons, but each one said there's an argument, and he's put them all together to say it's okay.
No way.
And then, ויש לצרף עוד סניף חשוב להתיר, מה שרגילים להסיק את התנור כרבע שעה או שלישה לפני כל אפייה בישול, וחום התנור יכול לשרוף בנקד חוט או קש הבא מגע עם התנור. Third reason is, when you turn on an oven, before preheating it, you might be machshir the oven altogether. Like hachshara. And he says hot enough to be considered libun. And therefore, if it's hot enough to be libun, of course it's hot enough to burn. And it's hot enough to burn what's in the oven. Of course, it's hot enough to burn what's outside. Therefore,
What temperature do you need to put it on for that?
what people he's talking about people who normally do it. What people usually preheat it on, I put 200. Not talking about hot enough to burn fire. So what's the temperature of fire? Celsius. I'm talking Celsius. It's 200 Celsius around. And therefore, bottom line, he says, he has 3 levels. Lichatchila, the ideal is he throws in a chumrah for those who lichatchila. Lichatchila, to be machmer, he says then wait 24 hours between meat and milk, and preheat your oven, and be sure to use only things that are definitely solid, like cookies and cheesecake and pizza. Use only those for dairy. Have a meat oven. His default is ovens for meat. Occasionally you make something dairy, right? You make cookies with milk in it. That's the reality he's talking about. I know from my in-laws.
When you make a lasagna and you have the cheese on top, and I guess it's no different than the pizza.
Yeah, it's not liquid. He says that's not liquid. That's considered a solid, right? He's very clear about that. It's considered a solid. It's not liquidy. So he said that if you waited make sure 24 hours elapsed, preheat the oven, and use those pieces, no problem whatsoever. That's his first level, lekatchila. However, he says, "Nogim lakel bezen."
Sorry, which one are you reading?
The source number 10. Right? He says, we start with the underlying problem. Right? And then he says in the last line, in the second line, "בתנאי שהסיקו את התנור לפני אפייה השלישה. ונוהגים להקל בזה באוכלים גם בתוך מלט, אין למחוק בידם שיש על משהו לסמוכו." However, he says, if someone, all he does is preheat the oven, and doesn't wait the 24 hours, then he's also okay. You can't limchot biyadom. In other words, can't say you're eating not kosher. Right? You can't tell him anything. Is that the lechatchila yotzi al deshita? No. But if someone, all he does is between meat and milk is preheats his oven, and then what happens when you preheat it? It burns, and it machshires the oven between meat and milk. What are you going to tell him? You're going to tell him it's not kosher? You can't tell him it's not kosher because it's kosher. Okay? So that's how he breaks it up. You're the katchila, where he's good to be machmir and wait 24 hours and only use doughs and stuff that you have a meat oven only used for dairy, things that are not liquidy. And preheat your, I said preheat the oven, 24 hours, preheat your oven and only doughs and stuff like that. That is lekatchila. However, those who just preheat their oven beforehand, yesh al ma lismochu, and therefore people.
Is that what people do?
Many people, all they do between meat and milk is they preheat the oven, and obviously different trays.
You have to stop the meat.
Stop the
When you
meat.
cook the meat, you have to wait a little bit till it cools down and then preheat it again.
Yeah.
The
You
oven
take
has to
it
be
out.
cold and then
You have
get
to
it
wait.
out.
Oh, no. So the oven is not, according to this logic, think of the logic. You want to destroy any remnants of the meat. So if you still smell it there, obviously you do not destroy it. Okay? So you have to wait till it's over. Waiting for it to cool down makes sense. Or just turn it on a high temperature for a few minutes, have it all burn out, and then yesham mali smochu. If you ask Hamavad that what should I do ideally, he says no, but if people do that, there's nothing you can tell them. That's okay.
It's not kosher, it's only meat and milk.
It's talking meat and milk. Talking meat and milk. Right? Not kosher, not
And
kosher.
if
Yeah.
you have paragraph stuff in there, let's say a paragraph for meat, it doesn't make it.
Oh, that's not barnat. Par after meat, it remains par. It becomes not barnat, what we talked about in the second place, which is parv.
So if you cook the parv and meat at the same time, and they're not covered.
Parv and meat at the same time parv and meat at the same time would, if they're uncovered, might make it meaty. Because there it's not getting absorbed into the top of the oven and then coming out. It's going directly.
Or what if the meat's on top?
If the meat's on top and the parv is on the bottom, they might remain parv. They might remain parv.
Especially if they're covered.
If they're covered, of course it remains parv.
Not lechatchila.
If it remains,
Honestly, if they're covered, can you put milk and meat at the same time in the oven?
the Rama says you shouldn't, but the Simmer Shulchan Aruch says yes. In Farash, yes. We saw that in source number 1. However, the Rama says we don't do that. We don't do that. You don't make meat and milk at the same time in the oven. But can you? The Shulchan Aruch says yes. If,
But to put the parv and the fleshik at the same time of lechatchila, didn't we say?
the Shulchan source number 2. V'im echad me'em mechuseh b'ka'ara or b'betzek. If one has a covering, mutar tzatan afilu b'tanur katan u'piv satu. Even a small oven, milk and meat at the same time. If one of them is covered, the Shulchan Aruch says you can do that like a tchila. Okay, one of them is covered. The Rama says you don't do that, but the Shulchan Aruch says you can. Okay. Back to that's Chacham Vav. Rav Moshe Feinstein, his answer was, we already saw that. Lechatchila, that's 2 ovens. What are you talking about? B'diavad is the food kosher, yes. B'diavad, if you did it, you're kosher. But like we said, he's not willing to sign off that it's for sure gonna burn it. Rav Moshe Feinstein.
Oh, Moshe Feinstein,
Rav
in
Moshe.
America.
Yeah.
They had 2 ovens.
Yeah, Moshe Feinstein, 2 ovens. He said, you have to have 2 ovens. Because you're asking me like a tchila. If you had 1 oven where I tell you the food is not kosher, I can't tell you the food is not kosher. It'll probably burn in the top. But you want me to sign off and say it's for sure okay? I'm not going to sign off it's for sure okay. Yeah.
Usually for Shabbat, I always cook my parv stuff and meat oven first and then the meat stuff. But if I did it the other way, you just said that it's fine. So if I cook my meat stuff and then separately from that, cook my parv stuff afterwards, because I'm not it's still.
It remains parv. Remains
But
parv.
if I do it at the same time, it's probably.
If unless the meat is covered. If the meat is covered, then it remains parv.
Interesting. And it would be neat to the effect that, if I were to eat it, I'd have to wait.
We're going to have a class to answer that question. Because I'll just say we saw in class number 1 over a month ago that if you taste it and it doesn't taste, you don't taste the meat, you definitely don't have to wait 6 hours. So you can, that's a simple answer in all those cases, is taste it. It's kosher, right? Taste meat. And the class will see that maybe even if you do taste meat, it might not have to wait 6 hours. We have to, we're going to do that.
So I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
When you cook something meat in the oven, did you need to let it cool off before you heat it up again, or you don't?
You have to. What you do? You're doing the enim chot of Chacham Ovadia. Chacham Ovadia brought two solutions. One is wait 24 hours. Obviously, cool down. The second, he said, I can't nimchot. I can't say anything to someone who only preheats it. He didn't talk about people that cooling down before, and he said preheat it. But his logic is that you want to destroy any remnants of the dairy, and that's what the heating is done for.
So, you have something meat in the oven, okay? The oven is on. You take it out, okay?
Yeah,
It's still hot,
yeah.
okay?
Leave it, according to this logic, you leave it on for 20 minutes, half an hour. Make sure everything is, when it's empty, nothing's inside, everything gets burnt up, everything that was there gets burnt.
Leave the oven on.
Leave the oven on on a high temperature, it burns up. There, Chacham Ovadia say, I can't nimchot. If you use it now, I'm not going to say anything. Again, would he say lekatchila? No, but I'm not going to tell you anything. This guy's eating kosher. What am I going to say?
So
We
the
eat at
point
their
is
house.
not
Yeah, you can eat in his house. Yeah, you can eat in his house. I'm not going to. It makes sense.
So
No.
it's edible, but it's kosher, but not lechatchila. No matter what.
He doesn't say en lechatchila. He doesn't say b'diavad. He says en imchot. In other words, if you see someone doing this, then he's okay. You don't have to tell him anything. Because
What
there
does
is-
that mean?
he's basically saying he's definitely there are poskim that say you can do it lechatchila, and therefore if you choose to rely on those poskim, then the serious poskim and the logic is sound. I'm one machmir for myself. I'm telling you to be machmir as well. Rabbi Rabinowitz in his book Siach Nachum. Okay, we're going to finish here. He says he agrees with the very basic premise of Chacham Ovadia. He says regarding steam, you can just check if there's steam or not. And he says if you see there's steam in the food, then you should have one of the foods covered. But if you didn't cover it, b'diavad, it's kosher. So that's his ruling. Again, lekatchila, if you use the food that has steam in it, you made chicken soup, or not chicken soup, you made stew, and there's steam on top, then if you're going to make pizza in the same oven, make sure that pizza is covered. But if you made chicken and you didn't see any ze'ah on top, you can just look, then it's okay, also regular liquid. That is regarding ovens. Do we have 2 minutes for microwaves? We have to wait for next week. I think we have to wait for next week for microwaves. People want to know microwaves? Let's wait for next week. We'll show some. Oh, next week.
Hanukkah.
Hanukkah. People want to cast on Hanukkah, or their Hanukkah parties. We probably have a Hanukkah party every night. So,
With latkes or without?
what? The question is, show of hands, people think they won't be able to make a week off for Hanukkah? Okay, so wait on Hanukkah. So